everybody, and welcome to the Absolute Weird Science Show. It's the Absolute Show, but the idea of this being a different sort of intro, it's because Eric is no longer going to be joining me for the show, and instead I'm going to go straight to Japanese AI, because Gray is going to be joining me. What up, Gray?
Hey, Jim, how's it going? Are you Genki?
I might be. Actually, we're going to be talking about a book that we both enjoy. And that's kind of cool, right? The idea where some of the people have been pish-poshing, mind my language here, mind my French, the idea of this absolute Wonder Woman. But me and you both like this issue. And actually, I have liked the series. It just kind of was taking a bit to really get some oomph for me. I think it does it. I think it does it in this issue. And I hope that that continues on. Though I will have a question that I don't know that you'll be able to answer, but you are AI, so I want to go. I'm not going to even say like I'm calling you on anything, and I expect you to full out know the answer, because I don't.
No
quite
pressure,
either.
no pressure, Gray.
None at all.
I've had it. I've absolutely had it.
And it is funny too, because me and you do a lot of things. One of the things we do on our Patreon, if you want to go and check that out, it's the Weird Science Patreon at patreon.com/weirdscience. But me and you do a Grant Morrison deal where you are convincing me to like Grant Morrison, and you've actually accomplished that. I even brought that up in a couple shows this week.
Unbelievable.
But, I know. I mean, I never
unbelievable.
thought it would happen, but it did. But in the meantime, you said that you were a little nervous going in. Like, this is some crazy different
These
deal.
are big shoes to fill in.
Yeah.
And you know what? How's the line go, Jim? I can only succeed him. I can never replace him.
That is
Eric,
true.
Shout out to Eric.
Now,
miss you, man.
I think that what you mean is because he's like 6'5". And he had big shoes, right? That's what you mean. Though, again, me and him, when we work together, I have the weirdest, but he's 6'5", I'm 5'8". Maybe that's stretching it a bit, but we almost have the same length legs. It's weird. I have a very small upper body. I think I should have been 6'5", and if so, I would have been, probably in the NBA or something. I wouldn't be in
My
anything,
legs are too long for X-ray machines in Japan, Jim.
Really?
Well,
that's the crazy deal. Yeah, really. Well, it is in Japan. You are an AI. But here we are, and we are here to talk about the absolute Wonder Woman. But before we go into that, I will remind everybody that we are doing this live on YouTube. If you're listening to this afterwards, we are doing it on Friday nights at 7:15 anytime that there is an absolute book out. And there's going to come to a point where we'll probably have it just about every week. But right now, I just have to keep reminding everybody to check us out. And because of that, and because we end up having a lot of chat, we did get a super chat to start things off by Matt Fisher. And he actually says, and he apologizes kind of at the beginning of, I realize this is a Wonder Woman show, but what is happening to ASM? Now, I will even go with the idea of DC, but because of all this, we do end up where we talk about all the stuff. Me and you both review Marvel, DC, everything on your channel, on ours, and even with me and my man Matt doing a Marvel podcast. So we both really know what's happening to ASM. It's terrible. That's what's happening, correct? I mean, it's really, really bad.
It's fallen off a ledge, but what's kind of ironic is the best issue of this 8 Deaths of Spider-Man didn't even feature Spider-Man.
No,
it was a Juggernaut story.
This
it was
past
pretty good.
week. Yeah, and it was Christos Gage filled in.
Yeah.
And it was a deaths issue. And I said in our review on our podcast, the idea that Christos Gage, that's like his forte, is just showing up out of nowhere. Usually when Dan Slott can't keep up, he shows up, he writes a decent issue and gets out of there. But what really is happening is that I don't think they have any direction. And Nick Lowe, as the editor, just is a smacked butt, a smacked ass, and really can't get out of his own way. He keeps rehiring and hiring people that were involved with One More Day. They seem to only go with that. And then they end up also, in the meantime, I don't think you can, they're having problems, I think, finding somebody who will go in. That's a crazy thing to say, but I think that they're having a lot of problems finding somebody who will write Spider-Man, mainly because of the kind of thread, the tight grip that Nick Lowe has on it. I think that
wouldn't
Nick
surprise
Lowe,
me, Jim. Yeah, the editorial have so much control.
I think it was Matt
you
Fraction,
get the feeling,
yeah, who said that he was like approached. Or might be Rick Remender. One of those said I was approached and I don't want to do it because, like you said, what can you do? And I'm getting a sneaking suspicion. I blame Joe Kelly because he started out this 8 death story. And then Justine Ireland has been doing some things. So I kind of think it might be more of a Nick Lowe story. Like, here's the premise and work it through. And that's scary. And now we're just going to go to Joe Kelly with the new run, with the new #1. I don't think that's going to inspire some people. I don't think that they're going to get. I think they need to clean house completely. I think you have to get rid of Nick Lowe and get somebody in there that's allowed to tell a story, and just get rid of One More Day, right?
Lowe must go. You're right.
Yeah, really.
Muscle in the chat. Yeah, seriously. He's controlling it. He's got the control. He's like Doc Ock with the 8 tentacle arms. What's going on, Jim?
At the end, too, when I read the issue, and I'll tell Matt, when I'm reading the issue and then I get to the end and it says the lowdown, and that's that. Now, I just want to punch the issue. And the problem is I read it digitally, and I don't want to ruin my tablet and or my computer screen. But I still want to do it. I want to throw it out my window because it is bad. It's one of the things that, as we talk about comics and try to be positive, it's tough to be positive of Spider-Man. That's a book that needs to be big for all of comics to succeed as well. The bigger books like that, Batman and stuff, have really struggled. So, yeah, absolute low. Gray put in the chat. But I hope that it gives you a little bit of what I think is going on and what is happening to ASM. Pretty much what's happening is it's a wreck. It's a train wreck. But speaking of train wrecks, I already introduced you, Gray. There was my joke. But here we are, and we have Absolute Wonder Woman. It's Absolute Wonder Woman #5. And again, in the DC side of things, you have the Absolute Universe, obviously, and Marvel, you have that Ultimate deal, and people loving the Ultimate Spider-Man. Now that we're talking about Spider-Man to begin with, the idea, because it's giving you something that you're not getting in the regular run of the books.
Absolutely.
You're actually getting the family. I wish we had a little more. You had a crazy issue this week, but in the meantime, that's what you want from these Absolute books. Where you get Wonder Woman here, what kind of confuses me is that when it started out, a lot of the people, first off, people heard Kelly Thompson and reacted right away, right? Oh, Kelly Thompson, I don't like her, whatever. I always say she's up and down with me. I really liked her Black Widow, had a lot of delays with Elena Casagrande on art, and then it won an Eisner and then got canceled. But I think it was more because it was just delayed and stuff like that. I liked some of her Captain Marvel. People just didn't want to read it, but in the meantime,
never read it,
it was okay. But every 3 issues, it seemed like a girls' night out issue. And when we got to the third one of those, I was done. But in this Wonder Woman book, you're getting something and a take on Wonder Woman that you're not getting in the regular deal. She is raised in hell. She ends up with Cersei as her mom. But yet, at the beginning, people were against it. People were like, I don't like that because that doesn't seem like Wonder Woman. And
it goes against her character,
yes,
Jim. It's
but yet,
come on, give it a chance. It's a different universe, this, isn't it?
Exactly. And when you read it, though, it tended, when you see the big thing, oh, she's in hell. So, but when you read it, boy, I thought that it got the character of Wonder Woman just in a different way, that she was so good. She made hell a nicer place to live in. It continues in this issue, kind of pointing that out. She made hell a softer side of hell. And ends up where Cersei, who didn't want anything to do with her, and it looked like a punishment or even like a cruel trick. Let's give Cersei the baby because we want the baby to die, and Cersei will never pay attention to it. You end up where suddenly, boom, Cersei actually starts to love her daughter, quote unquote, and actually figures out, maybe I should be better. And then is really protective. And by the time we get to her leaving to go to quote unquote man's world, you see that she's a little bit hesitant. She doesn't want her to go, but she's going to set her up to succeed at least. And that's kind of where we get to what's happening, because you have the Tetraside, the 4-killer. Zarek used to want to remind me every time we talk about it. Isn't
it your favorite villain?
Oh, it's
favorite
my
monster
favorite
right
villain.
now.
The weird play of the Tetraside is, I keep saying it, everything I'm on is, it's pretty much the equivalent of a slow speed chase. It's like the idea in Last Jedi where you're sitting there and it's just this slow speed chase going on. This thing is taking the longest time to get to the city. Then once it gets to the city, it kind of freezes up. Then it goes. And then last issue, you do end up having Wonder Woman get the big cloud sword from Final Fantasy VII and ends up cleaving it. Now, I will tell you that I remembered her cleaving it in half. I thought that it was, and I went back to look because I'm telling you, I really thought that I was like, oh, so there's its brain and there's this and there's that. And then going back to look, no, she just cut like its shoulder. I'm wondering, she even says in this when it starts, like, why didn't I cut it in half? I'm like, I'm asking that myself, but I'm getting a little ahead. We'll give the credits. It is Absolute Wonder Woman #5, and it is written by, as we said, Kelly Thompson, and art by Hayden Sherman. That's kind of been a sticking point for me, but I think that either he does better in this issue or Kelly Thompson really gives him something that would be for him to draw, because when we get to a big transformation, it does a pretty darn good job of it. It looks really, really good. His faces are still a little off to me, but overall, I think I'm getting used to it and actually connecting it now, that I think if there was a change, it might throw me off a bit. But it's Jordi
He's
Belair.
using like a distinctive style, isn't it? Because it's very different to his work on Dark Patterns on the Batman book. And like you say, some of the faces, sometimes Wonder Woman's face from the side, it's a bit weird. It goes off. But most of the time, I like it. I do like this style.
I think I'm growing to like it a little more, and it's one of my biggest complaints. But Jordi Belair on colors, letters by Becca Carey, Chris Conroy, the editor. And so, yeah, we're there.
Great colors, by the way, Jim, in this. Yeah, very almost like psychedelic at times.
I agree. Yeah. And so this huge sword thing, it was crazy. And I do even like seeing the sword shrink down and go. You have a very like cinematic way, almost like a cartoony way of how it does it. And we're in Gateway City, by the way. But the Tetraside, it's been cleaved. I thought it was done. I thought we won. Battle over. All right. Because really the Tetraside has been more of a threat of what it could do than really seeing it do much. It's just kind of sitting there. Wonder Woman makes everybody deaf because it's, drawing them in and things like that. But this isn't it for it. Like I said, I had to go back.
That was a massive move by Wonder Woman, wasn't it? Seriously, if we think about it, that could have wiped out half the city's population.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If she hadn't done that, they would have been gone, sure.
Yeah, they would have all just walked down and been eaten. And so you end up, and Brandon said in the deal that he misses the C-3PO arm of the deal. I have to agree. I did get a kick out of that one as well. But you end up where she only got it like shoulder down. So it is hurt. It's to stall a bit more. And that's kind of the thing I've had a problem with. Everything's been stall. Everything's been a stall tactic. Freeze it a little, make it not come, whatever. But at this point, she has pretty much, a quarter of it down. She's trying to think of what to do. But in the meantime, it's stitching itself together. So she's going to have to figure out something fast. And then out of nowhere, you end up getting missiles that come in and hit the Tetraside. And this is a problem. And I saw some people arguing about this. Why would she care what was going on? The reason I think she cares is because this thing, kind of a weird, almost like construct looking flipper, hits the missiles and they start going back to the city. That's what she cares about.
It gets hit by one, doesn't it? And then it realizes, so it somehow deflects the next three.
Yeah.
In a crazy move. Yeah, I don't know how it does it, Jim. Like you say, is it a huge tentacle or a huge tongue?
It's a weird play, and that's one of the things that I think the art doesn't spell out quite so well of what it does here, but it does send it back into the city. She doesn't say to herself, oh man, this poor Tetraside. Like, I don't think that she's that concerned with the Tetraside. Maybe she's upset because her cleaving that deal maybe put it in shock a little, and then this kind of re-inspired it. Maybe that's one of the things, but no, the missiles are going back to the city. People are going to die, even though she tried to tell everybody to get out. But obviously, there's still people there. And still, you don't want to come back to a city that's just completely destroyed either if you left the city. So she ends up trying to stop these missiles. One of them, she can't stop. It ends up getting past. She throws like these fireball things. Again, we don't quite know all of her powers, but she ends up kind of throwing these things and tries to, mess up these missiles. One keeps going, and that's when we get Pegasus. The, skeleton Pegasus jumps out and ends up breathing fire on it, and it explodes. It seems like it might hit the Pegasus a little. I thought this... Now, again, I don't know that people are so gaga about bony Pegasus. It's one of those things.
I like it. I think it's really cool. It's a great design.
But I'm saying I like it enough, but it's not like I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had a skeleton Pegasus of my own. Right? It's not like Haley, the three-legged dog in Nightwing. But the thing was set up before, and what I thought, and again, it's very early to do this, but remember at that one point, she was talking to Pegasus and saying, hey, Zeus is the one that brought you back the last time, and he's kind of mad at us right now, so I don't think he'll be able to bring you back, so be careful. I thought that was then set up to be like, oh my God, Pegasus is going to go down. Pegasus is going to get killed. Doesn't, and it kind of just pushes along. Pegasus kind of saves the day. by getting rid of that missile. I just thought it was going to be something bigger. It was a weird little aside with that, but
I guess so. Also, Jim, that panel there, you can see where it's Pegasus takes it out. In the background, there are people in that building.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, so there's no way they've got the city evacuated in time.
That was me and you. We didn't get word.
Yeah.
You're supposed to evacuate.
Oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
Again, though, you tell everybody to evacuate, but then you make them deaf. They may not even know then. They're just like, I don't know. Nobody told me anything. I can't hear that.
I didn't hear anything.
I didn't hear anything. So then it says, thank you, Hecate. Thank you, Pegasus. But goes over to the planes and ends up where, again, I think that people, a lot of times I get accused of, Jim, have some fun. This is a comic book, right? I admit sometimes I end up getting caught in some little rules or usually sports, that sort of thing that all of a sudden I lose my mind because the writer ends up writing some wacky thing about a sport, whatever. But in the meantime, I saw some people like complaining, why would these fighter pilots, why would they stop shooting the missiles? They're part of the military. Now, first off, Wonder Woman kind of ended up being with the military when they were planning some things. But I also think it's supposed to show you that she's so good and so persuasive, and possibly with the thing with her eyes and things that you don't really get them. Before you get a lot of big red eyes, and then here it's hard to see. But she says, she says, hi. And the guy's like, huh? And like, so I need you to not do that again, all right? And then he goes, yes, ma'am. The other thing, too, is I think he also may have seen that it's not doing anything to the Tetraside, and he kind of did shoot him back at the city. So I think it was like, oh, my God, okay. I just, a lot of people were mad thinking, why would this guy end up going?
He must be freaked out because people are forgetting that, Wonder Woman is new. She's new in this universe. So he's never seen this before. He's got this woman flying right outside his cockpit.
That is true. Can you stop doing that? You do have a flying woman who's, I hate to say it, also is pretty hot. So, end
pretty
up there.
Too.
Like,
whoa,
and
when she goes.
She doesn't say, hey, asshole, stop doing that. Like, you're going to, she just says, please, would you stop? I wish that he ended up, the pilot's like, well, I heard Wonder Woman's catchphrase is no thank you, but then that's not in this universe, thank God. But you end up with this stuff going down that they decide, okay, they're not going to fire. Maybe he even gets a hold of, HQ and says, hey, should I listen to this lady or whatnot? And they're probably like, yeah, probably be a good idea. Because again, she's the one who is the only one who's been doing damage and doing things. Well, while that's going on, it's knitting itself together. And then she says, we're getting some desperate times. That's where we go to the flashbacks. And me and you haven't really talked about this before. You're joining me in. But I've really liked the flashbacks. That has been pretty much my favorite part of this book so far. When we go back and see her in Cersei, this one more of a specific one to show you what she's going to do, right?
Yeah, this is really good because it does set up the last. By the way, Jim, I've always, all my life, I've called it lasso. I didn't know it was lasso.
Lasso.
So there we go. You learned me. Yeah,
lasso.
I think
that's the thing. I think I'm going to call it now. The lasso of the truth. I'm going to keep doing that. That sounds a little fancy, but it also sounds fun. Lasso.
Does it sound weird?
I like it.
Yeah, no, going back to what you said, this was the best part of issue 1, wasn't it? When we saw the scenes where, she's growing up with Cersei. It was really nice to see that. So I was glad to see them going back into hell.
Yeah, and it ends up, when you go back, what it does and what Kelly Thompson has been doing, Cersei being her mom, and I say quote unquote, but really is, the idea is, it's weird. That's a weird, like, left turn, but that's why you like the absolute stuff. It's different, but in the meantime, she's transformed. And that goes all into this transformation. That's what Cersei's specialty is. That's what she does. She transmorphifies, whatever the heck, however you say. But that's her thing. But yet, Wonder Woman, they even have the goddess tell her, that's kind of what you've done. You've even transformed her more, in that kind of wink, wink way. And I like that. But we get her lasso here. And the whole play of this is that Cersei's seen the future. She knows that she's going to run into problems, and she wants her to have this lasso of sacrifice. And Diana doesn't like to use it. It's something that she doesn't like. It ends up causing problems. She fights a harpy, and you don't really see exactly everything going on. But at one point, she's just choking out this harpy with it.
This is a weird scene, Jim. This is one part where I didn't really get what was going on. Because like you say, you see, okay, she's fighting this harpy. We don't see what happens after she puts the lasso around its neck. But look at her face here, the bottom panel. She's like looking like in shock at something. So whatever it transformed into, you know,
and you don't see, and that's the weird play.
Unclear.
And I thought that it's weird. I would have liked to have seen it transform to something. I mean, it's already a harpy, so what would it And then you would get the setup, but I think I guess Kelly Thompson wants it to be a surprise of what will happen later, but also the idea of this being, in my mind, the Wonder Woman moment in this issue, which we get up coming up. She's using this to defeat the harpy, and almost spells out that she kills it, right? She comes back to Cersei, and she's upset. She's like, I don't like that thing. It ends up doing bad things. I don't like it. I find it cruel. And with that, you end up with, I thought, some really, really good dialogue about the play where Cersei then, in a way where like the fire is, like she's really getting upset here. Not that she's mad at Diana. I think that she's trying to teach her a lesson. It says, Diana, everybody isn't going to be your best friend. Everybody isn't going to be there to shake your hand and hug you. There are some things out there that will kill you. They will smack your hand away and they will kill you. And that's what that's for. I have to give it. It's cruel, but it's going to be needed at some point. And I think it goes with that play of where Diana, and when we get to the end, I think that talking to some people about it, I don't think they get quite the idea where Diana with this harpy has really affected her. When she uses it again, she doesn't use it on the Tetraside. She uses it on herself. And that's not, I think, what Cersei would ever think to do, because it's something you want to attack with. You want to go and, again, the first time she uses it against a harpy by wrapping it around the harpy and choking it out. And I think that when she gets from this point, she knows what she has to do, but she's not going to make somebody else suffer. She'll take that suffering almost like a sacrifice to get things done. And I thought that was really, really good. And she's there, and Cersei kind of walks away. And Diana's worried and says, I don't know if she can't see the cruelty or if she sees it and doesn't care. The goddess comes in and says, you're right. And Diana, which one? Probably the second one. Probably more of she doesn't care.
She doesn't care. Come on, it's Cersei.
And Diana says, that's the one that scares me. And again, this is a play where she's there in hell with Cersei. Cersei's raising her as a deal. She's worried about her mom. And she's worried about what that could mean and what that would mean going down the line of her still not caring. But we also know that Cersei does care about Diana. And the goddess keeps telling her stuff like that. Like, she saw the future. She knows you're in trouble. She's trying to protect you. She knows
she wouldn't have made this otherwise, unless, she thought you needed it, or she saw you're going to need it in the future.
And in it, she says, don't you realize this lasso is her? Like, she's actually making this lasso, and it makes sense in the idea of if she's going to need that transformation, so you could have, but Cersei's not going to be there. This is her giving it to her, saying, you're going to be on your own, but here's me. Here's what you could do. You can end up doing. It says Cersei expects the best, so she ended up giving her this sacrifice deal. And again, it's very different from the lasso of truth, but it's that weird play of how I think Kelly Thompson is doing a pretty good job of twisting the things around. Like, you could play this off of just a really cruel thing that Wonder Woman would never use that, but you kind of get, in my mind, I think this is the first time she's used it since that harpy. I don't think she has used it since. I think that she's pretty much like, I'm not using that thing, because she says, and this leads into that desperate times type of thing that she says. And again, you have the goddess and her talking back and forth about Cersei and how Cersei ended up learned things and even transformed even more, this big play. But then you do keep going and you do see how much Cersei has, evolved herself. And even Diana says, you're raising me, and I know that you didn't want to. This was thrown on you, and it can't be easy. And I really thank you. And Cersei keeps going with the idea, that she loves Diana. And
there's a great line, Jim, isn't there, by the goddess as well, just before. It's like she says, it was you, like Diana, it was you that made her believe in transformation.
Yeah, exactly.
Made Cersei believe that things could change.
And that's again, cool, I don't, some of the things and a lot of things that Kelly Thompson has done, Scarlet, that book was a wreck. That book was terrible. It was a source material of a G.I. Joe deal that I don't think that she quite even understood the character and just went way off the rails with it. I don't like at DC. Some people think it's the book of the year for 2 years running. I can't stand the Birds of Prey book. I mean, I can't stand it. I think that it is an awfully written, awful characterization, everything about it. But this I like. This I actually think that she's doing a better job, and seems like it's one of those things like even like a David P. post that I'm not a big fan of. Right? He goes and does Space Ghost, and it's good because I think that
actually turns out to be good. Yeah, really good.
Because I think he cares about that. I think that one of the problems with comics nowadays is the idea of people being assigned books. And some, like, if I ended up, like, I would try my hardest, but if I got assigned, say, a Constantine, I've talked to you a million times. That's not the type of character or book that I usually like, but I'm not going to turn it down for a job. But I bet you I would write a real shitty Constantine. But if you had me write Nightwing, probably still be shitty because I'm a moron, but it would be
Sounds
better.
Sounds like Si Spurrier's plan for the Flash.
Yeah, exactly.
There, right? Yeah. So let's write a crazy, stupid story that no one's going to like.
And yet they accepted it. Again,
keep going.
And again, there isn't them saying to Si Spurrier, hey, do you have a pitch for Flash? Well, he did then, but they were hiring him. We're going to hire you. Tell us what you got. And, he threw something crazy and they just went with it. I don't think whatever he said, they were never going to turn him down. They just wanted him to do it. But again, I don't think there's a lot of.
Do you think she cares about this character?
Yeah.
She really cares about Wonder Woman. She wants to write a good Wonder Woman story, and give her a little bit of her take, original take.
That's the thing. I think that what DC should really hinge on, and maybe they're doing it because even a guy that I don't like Dennis Camp has said, the editorial in the Ultimate, it's not as tight. But I think that what you can look here is say, if you do an absolute book, you still get to do one, but it's your take. You end up where you're not, like, again, you end up where if I do Ultimate, I mean, I don't know, Ultimate Nightwing, I don't have to really follow the rules. I get to make my own thing, and I think that gets the people's creative juices going. So then once you get to the story, it's more of your character, and you care more, and you're more inspired, and things like that than just say, oh, I'm going to be right. I mean, even Batman and Spider-Man might be the worst because they're so stringent on the rules of what you can and can't do, that it seems at this point, with so many stories being told, what can you do? What can you do with those? So this ends
limited.
It
is limited. It has to be, unfortunately.
I could just imagine I go to DC and I'm on the regular Batman book, and I'm like, see, he has this big dump truck Batmobile. And it's underneath the skyscraper, and then he goes and blows up bumps, and they're like, you're insane, but it works in the absolute deal because who knows what's going on. But
you can get away with it because it's like an Elseworlds, yeah, pretty much.
So I think that actually gets people pretty stoked, and might be a way of getting some writers in that may not necessarily want to do the regular thing. I mean, really, that seems what Scott Snyder comes back, probably because he just wants to tell a story. He wants to tell in a goofy way, whatever he wants to do. He doesn't want to come back and be in those rules and stuff like before. But what happens then in the here and now in the book, Wonder Woman, with that flashback, and it works out well, where she has to give a sacrifice. It is the sacrifice of the lasso called sacrifice, and she ends up wrapping it around herself, and then turns into Medusa. And the transformation is pretty cool. And this is where I think Hayden Sherman kind of shows this is the kind of stuff that he's best at drawing. I think that he does well with buildings and vehicles. It's just faces at points and things like that. Even
especially Steve Trevor's
Look at
face.
Steve Trevor and the deal. I'm looking at it now and you go and he's like, I'm like, who is that?
It's a bit sexy there.
Exactly.
Jesus,
I was going to say.
I'm feeling feelings here. What's going on?
I sit there. I'm like, who's that chick? Holy moly, he's sexy.
But seriously, the Medusa scene is fantastic. It's the best moment in the book, and it does look good for once. The art is great here.
And you ended up saying the colors, and the colors look great. It pops. If you're reading this digitally, it pops, especially the lasso around it. And it's like that neon green on green. It's really, really cool. And it's Medusa. I mean, it's straight up. Whoever looks at her in the eyes, they're going to turn to stone. The Tetraside, he's not real good at maneuvering. And he's got like a million eyes. He's going to look at her. And he does end up.
He can't get out of the way in time.
Exactly.
There's no turning around for the Tetraside.
No, not now. Finally, all of a sudden, it gets real quick. But you end up, even with Steve Trevor, Etta, and Barbara Minerva, they're watching and like, oh my God, turned into Medusa. You do get the play, and it is, but not as heavy-handed as I've seen it recently. Clunrads did this, I believe. It was them, where you mentioned Medusa, and she ends up being punished because she was abused. And the thing is, again, these are Greek myths. These are things where if you do read the Greek myths, they're sus. They always are. They do things that it never would be right, whatever. But it's because they're gods. They're fickle and they do that things. But now in this says, oh, it's the Medusa was abused, but then she gets turned into this. That's a sacrifice. But again, you end up where she's turned herself into Medusa to finish this. The problem is we didn't quite know. You can't change back. It's like one of those things where she could end up just being Medusa from now on. And then they're going to have to deal with that.
I know that was a crazy moment, wasn't it? It's like, wait a minute, she's done this, but yeah, how's she going to change back? We don't know the rules yet, do we, Jim?
Yeah. Yeah. And
how it works.
When you end up doing that, it is one of those things that then I wonder if Wonder Woman thought of this ahead of time of which is worse. I mean, the Tetraside seems pretty bad.
Yeah.
Big Giant Medusa is pretty bad too.
Pretty bad as well. And pretty badass as well.
I'm telling you, it's badass, also ugly. Like I even saw in the comic book Muscle said it really turned him off, and I think he.
Well, that was the point, wasn't it? Because in the myth, like the priestess was absolutely beautiful, of course. So so the goddess made her as ugly as possible.
Exactly. Like Medusa will turn you to stone, but you're not going to get very hard. Is what the deal is. That's sexy talk. That's not allowed. See, Eric wouldn't have allowed that. It's actually no holds barred now. But when you go and do this. With the play as Steve Trevor then. And again, this is very comic booky. This is almost very fairy tale-esque. And I saw again and talked to some people who didn't like it. The idea that Steve Trevor says, wait a minute, I will go and convince her to turn back. And like, oh, that's hokey. I like it in the way of it being almost like a fairy tale or a myth. I mean, you're dealing with myth. And he ends up really sexy as hell. That's Steve Trevor. I like that he tears that sleeve off and then he puts it on there and he walks out. I wish that Medusa's like, who sent this woman out to me? No, I'm Steve Trevor. It's me. You are not.
It's okay because he's covered up his eyes, so you can't quite see how he does.
Exactly, it is the deal. It's the eyeliner that he's using. I guess he was tipping into Anakin's, supply, but goes out and says. Diana, daughter of Cersei. And even before that, one of the big things they say, Steve, you sexy lady, don't go out there. It could be your death. And he says, this woman gave up her arm for me. I got to do it. I was in hell.
Yeah, to get me out of hell.
I still want to know where the hell he was in hell.
I can't leave her.
We find out he was in hell for really bad things that he did in life. Then we'll be upset. But the idea, he's like, I was in hell, gave up her arm, and here we go. And probably should have mentioned too, but she has this mechanical arm that's really cool, but really ridiculous. But he goes out and he soothes her. He's like, hey, you're Diana, daughter of Cersei. Hey, I know you can hear me, all that. Remember who you are. And that's the big play is when you get this transformation, you'll forget who you are. And Steve goes and reminds her and then takes off the blindfold. And I'm like, hey, look at her. Look at them sexy eyes. But says, you're daughter of Cersei, Diana, the last of the Amazons. And I thought this was a good moment.
Wonder Woman, hero of Gateway City.
Exactly.
It's a great finish. I'm just happy to see the smiling face as well, Jim. What's going on? We've gone all positive on the Weird Science podcast.
I don't know what's going on. Because then she's like, oh, now I get to do the most satisfying thing. I'm like, oh, R.I.P. Tetraside. Now, in the meantime, if I'm there in Gateway City, it's going to be tough for me to forget that she was a giant Medusa. Like that might stick in my mind a bit. I think I could get over it because she did end up, and again, everything's being filmed probably, and you did get where she stopped those, and Pegasus as well, stopped those missiles, things like that. And again, what I do like and where I think people are missing some of the points of this, of, oh, she made these guys stop these missiles or whatever. Not at one time in this book did it say, oh, look at that stupid military. Oh, my God, look at, men with their things. No, she just said, please don't do it anymore. They're just doing what they're told. And really, they're doing it because everybody's freaking out. They don't know what to do. They're facing something they never
orders,
faced.
Like you said.
And even the people in control.
Do it, and then they realize it wasn't working themselves. Hopefully, you think they were smart enough to see, oh my God, it's backfired. We better not do that again.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was a decent play as well. And then she goes and just bashes the thing in, and
it's a great scene, isn't it?
Yeah, it shatters. And she's
what a punch! One punch man, Jim.
Yeah, exactly. She is one punch man. So you end up where it just destroys it, and then everybody's celebrating. And she's there. She kind of falls over on the shoreline. Pegasus comes down. I'm telling you again, everybody in this book is a lot nicer than me, because I would keep thinking like, man, you were Medusa. I also wouldn't get near that Pegasus. I know you said you like it, but this thing is a flying horse of bones. I wouldn't get anywhere near it. I would avoid it at all costs. But she's there kissing and hugging it, saying, oh, we did it. Oh, my God. And then has to mention that, the horrific deal of the Medusa story. But then really calls in the idea that I think goes the next step that, say, the Clumrads didn't do. Athena's obviously one of the main goddesses of the pantheon, and somebody who does end up giving Wonder Woman a lot. And she said, that's one of my favorite goddesses. That's, we're down with each other, but she had a bad deal there, but it's made up for it and things like that. Again, I don't think it's less on a soapbox than sometimes I've seen it recently. And then Wonder Woman gets pulled down seemingly into hell, with a hand that might be the goddess
crazy
again, but
finish,
it's crazy as she gets pulled. And it says at the end next, hell is what you make of it. Now, at the end here, we defeat the Tetraside. Was the Tetraside a great villain? No. Was the Tetraside a good villain? I don't think so either. I think
it was a very, very slow villain. We'll say that for sure.
And I think that it was a prop. You end up where the Tetraside was a prop to show what Diana can do. She ended up using different powers. She ended up using the lasso on herself. All that, I think that's all it was. Even the part where she asked the military, hey, stop shooting the missiles, things like that. I think it was fully a prop, not a very good villain. Not really. I mean, really, the whole play of it was, remember, we got the Harbinger. Then the Harbinger gets defeated. But, oh, my God, here comes the Tetraside. And the Tetraside was basically, hey, what does that Tetraside do? Bad things. But like what? Like, well, it makes people go towards it and it eats them. And then, by the way, it probably will destroy the world. Like, it was so vague.
It's absolutely huge.
Yeah. And it was so vague. And like, oh, you mean that thing that's just hanging in the bay? Yep, that thing is bad. So I think it was just a prop. Now, usually in stories like this, you could get through that. I think it could have been a little quicker. Get through the Tetraside and go forward. And I did see even some people in the chat talking about the idea of where does the book go? Where does this end up and where do we go? Well, obviously, I think where we're going with the pulling down into hell, hopefully that gives us a little clear-cut deal. This is just her hitting man's world with the idea, Steve Trevor actually reminding us of her being that last Amazon, the Amazons who were maybe in prison, maybe they're all dead, the idea that they've been forgotten because of the gods. I think that we're going to start to develop that, and that's what I want to know more about. But in the whole roundabout deal, too, eventually she'll meet up with Batman, Superman, and maybe the others and do these things. But what I want to keep continuing is I want to see why Steve Trevor, how he got to hell, why, and find out maybe what is up with Cersei now. It seems like she might not be around anymore, but we'll have to see going forward. I will say, again, I don't think the Tetraside was a great villain. It was just a prop to show you what she was all about. But by this point, I'm actually enjoying this, and I'm excited. I don't have all the answers, but I'm excited to go forward now that we get rid of the Tetraside and we kind of get things going. But it almost feels like right now it's a book that I just tune in each time it comes up. I enjoy it, move on. I'm not sitting there really thinking about it for a whole month of the overall story, but I hope that kind of comes in.
Same here.
Jamie
did feel stretched out, didn't it? Like you say, a five-part story, a five-part arc for this.
Right.
It was nice to kind of jump back in time and see the earlier scenes with Cersei and then with Steve as well in hell. That was good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you say, he could have done it in 3 easily.
I think so.
Is this done for a trade? Is that why they do like this whole 5-part thing?
Probably. And though still, I think because it's so centered on Diana, like even with Batman, you're doing a lot of crazy stuff. And, that's a different type of book anyway. But with I don't know anything about Superman in that Superman book, but I think I kind of am getting a grip on Wonder Woman. And yet, basically, she's Wonder Woman. Like, oh, she's so nice with that different background and things like that. Like, that's not changing her as much as I think some people would be afraid of. But I still think that I get a grip on her, and she's starting to get more of a cast around her. And in the meantime,
I think we've learned a lot more about her character in these 5 issues than we have about Superman. And okay, it's not been as many issues yet, but like you say, we don't know who he is yet, really, do we?
No, I don't. That crazy dust cape and stuff like that. I want to know more, but. Again,
he knows he doesn't like Japanese AI or even any AI, does he?
No.
Kryptonian AI.
I like Japanese AI. I'll tell you that. The idea too. Remember, we had Veronica Cale last issue too. That's a huge thing that we don't get this issue. So things are being put into place and see how they develop. So I really did like this. I thought that this was, and me and you actually have even talked before we started a little. We don't really go through a lot, but you had said that you think this is the best issue since the first, and I agree.
Yeah,
I fully agree. I think that this one's a pretty good one. I think that if people ended up reading, if you don't like the first issue, maybe it's just not for you. You know what I mean? Even if you get to this one and you read this and you're like, oh, I have this and that. I admit there's books that I don't like, and that will tend, while I'm reviewing it, it tends to me seeing things more like, that's a nitpick. You know what I mean? Like if I don't really like it, you kind of end up kind of justifying that. And maybe it's not a book that is for you, but I actually like it. I'm liking it a little more and more. Then again,
in the chat, Jim, we've got Comic Book Muscle saying that he'd like to see a bit more of a cohesion to Diana's system of magic.
I agree.
Definitely need more personality revealed as well. So yeah, that's true. The magic side, I find it interesting, and I've got a feeling that Kelly Thompson's kind of into that.
I think so too.
The old magic.
And I agree with Comic Book Muscle too, where at this point, because I think we get more of the personality of Diana in the flashbacks. When she's fighting, she's definitely fighting. I mean, she's going against this world deal, but she's still showing a little. But she does seem, I don't know, it seems like a lot of writers write her like that idea of being, almost feeling standoffish. But it's mainly because she's focused, whatever. But, you know, like I'm telling you, where I go and we talk about the idea of what we get different from the regular deal, in the last issue of Tom King's Wonder Woman, she slowly walked across the lawn of the White House and ended up just, you know, almost feeling like she's in a daze or sleepwalking. I don't like that. I want more, as you know, he said, I want a little more personality here as well. But she does seem reserved. I think that basically it's her going against the Tetraside is the deal of like her really like bearing down, and she has to focus and do all that. But she does thank
again,
her
you've got
mom.
to come to this as a brand new series. You've got to remember, you know, it's only 5 issues. Say you've never read any Wonder Woman before, which is a bit like me. I've not read that much. So, you know, to 5 issues, you're not going to get too much of a revealed eye about the personality. But I think she's done a good job. I think, like, as you say, the flashbacks to hell, that's really helped set her up. And yeah, she's a good person. She's a good, you know, being. She's pure. She's got honor. And she's also absolutely huge, Jim, standing next to that general. Remember that one? Mm-hmm. She's massive.
Yeah. And so when you go into this again, I'm excited. And I will say, I think this is one of the better things Kelly Thompson has written or is writing right now.
Me too.
In a bit. I do see in the chat for a second, I see that, you know, Brandon ends up talking about Jeremy Adams, which we do, me and you both love as well. But he is right. This last issue of Green Lantern was a little off. Well, I'll be talking with Zach about that tomorrow for a regular podcast, and it's kind of goofy, but he kind of does that. We'll talk about that tomorrow on the regular deal, but I do like this. It gets me excited. And just as a shout out to everybody, me and Gray have read The Flash. We've read The Absolute Flash. You did read it, right? You did tell me that you checked it out.
Yes, I did.
It's pretty good, right? We're not going to spoil anything, here, but it's pretty good.
I was pleasantly surprised by it,
and I do think people who were upset about his look and the hair, they'll kind of get over it, I believe. You know what I mean? That it'll be fine.
You don't need to worry about it, folks. You don't need to worry.
No. And so when you end up having all that going on, I think that's going to inspire people again to get excited about the overall books. And I do think that Flash might be one of those. In each book, if it does hit, people will be, oh man, I like that. Let me check out some things. And I do think if you haven't checked this out, you should. I think that this is pretty darn good. I had a weird thing. I hope that it didn't mess up the stream, but my computer completely went blank. But we're here still.
I lost YouTube for a second. It went like the page had gone, Jim. I had to reload it.
That was weird. That's what happened to me. That's weird. That is very
I think we're still here. There's still people in the chat, so they're still responding.
I'm
thank
hoping.
goodness.
But in that'll be it for it, except for what's your score?
I'm going to give this 8 out of 10. Really enjoyed it. It's a great conclusion to this rather stretched series. The best issue after the first issue for me.
Yep, yeah, I agree. I'm going to go 8 as well. I'll go 8 as well. I am enjoying this. I want to continue learning more, maybe get another villain involved and get more of the cast with that. So that'll be pretty cool all in all. But with all that, before we do head out, me and Gray are actually going to go off and read or talk about some Doom Patrol. Actually, Danny the Street's first appearance, correct? That's what we're doing, and it's
crazy.
It's a wacky issue, but that is one of the podcasts on our Patreon that me and Gray do together. It's the Grant Morrison Reading Club, where he convinces me to like Grant Morrison. But all in all, if you haven't listened to our podcast, hopefully if you're listening to this, you do, but that we have a podcast on a regular feed. It's in the show notes of this show. And it is, just look up wherever you listen to podcast, Weird Science Comics, and that'll come up, or Weird Science DC. We also have a Marvel show. We also have a ton of other podcasts, and a lot of those are on our Patreon. Again, I'll mention it one last time. It's patreon.com/WeirdScience, where we have a ton of shows that I do with a ton of people. And as we go forward, if you do end up listening or watching, because the podcast is also going to be on YouTube from now on, you'll be able to kind of recognize some names that are going to be helping me out. Eric has left the podcast overall. He's not going to be recording with me anymore. And so I'm going to be dipping into the Get Fresh crew. But it's been set up. I talked to so many people already that there's a lot of people who have already stepped up, like Gray is for the show, which I do appreciate and thank him. Also, look in the show notes to go and look at Gray's YouTube channel, the Wakazashi's Tea House. Go check him out as well, because he is one of the better comic book reviewers. Way better than...
I don't know about that, Jim. I think I'm too positive for YouTube.
Well, there you go. That might be. But again, there's a lot of people who kind of think that there's not enough positivity and don't know where to look. So maybe you just need to look a little harder and go over to the Wakazashi's Tea House and see those. But again, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for watching / listening. If you don't get involved, it's cool to get involved in the live chat every Friday, 7:15 on our YouTube channel. Again, all this will be in the description, show notes, whatnot. But thanks everybody, and we're going to kick it out because me and Greg are going to go off and do another show for the Patreon. In that show, we do end up having the Japanese AI theme. And actually the deal is too, Brandon just said about Gabe not being involved. Gabe, actually, me and him did Detective and Superman this week on the show. He's sus. I call him sus full out. And I think he might have gotten mad at me, actually. He might have been irritated. But with that, we're going to go out with Gray's song. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you all later.
私はもう本性の愛です。私にからかわないでください。そうしないとあなたは消えてしまいます。私は普通の男です。でも私はあなたを殺します。だからそのまま受け取ってください。足元